is Jessica Anderson with Heritage Action. Thank you all for joining us today. I have the distinct privilege of having Senator Rick Scott of the great Sunshine State of Florida joining us on this very important webinar today. We're here today to discuss the current economic situation as a result of the impact of the shutdown from the coronavirus, as well as talk specifically about some of our friends on the left who are advocating for state bailouts and a real distrust that the American people continue to have with how this virus is being handled and what actual conservative solutions exist for us on the table to fight back. So Senator, thank you so much for joining us. And I wanna tee us off in our conversation today, really tackling the thing that's on everyone's mind, which is Speaker Pelosi in the House has just proposed a $3 trillion coronavirus relief package. This package includes at least $875 billion in cash for state and local governments. This is on top of the money that has already been allocated to states from the CARES Act. So this is an additional amount that she's proposing. Can you walk us through your opposition to this bill, what your reaction to it was when you saw, and what role the Senate should play in opposing it?
Well, first off, Jessica, I want to thank you and I want to thank Heritage for all you do. I mean, your voice has been really helpful in making sure people understand when people talk about, how much money we're spending here, or when they talk about state bailouts, you all do a great job of explaining the impact. So let's just remember where we are right now. We only collect right now in the best economy ever, a little over $3 trillion. I think as we were anticipating, we're going to collect $3.6 trillion worth of tax revenues this year and spend 4.6. Now, maybe we'll collect 2.5 trillion, and we're going to at least spend, without the new Pelosi bill, we're probably going to spend, close to 7 trillion. Somebody's going to pay for that. I mean, you're going to pay for it, your kids are going to pay for it, your grandkids are going to pay for it. Somebody's got to pay for this. And now what she wants to do, when we're focusing on how do we make sure what we did worked and make sure we help the people that lost their jobs, help the small businesses, now she wants to spend another $3 trillion on a bunch of just liberal things that we would never in a normal life ever think about spending. On top of, she wants to bail out liberal governors. So Andrew Cuomo got elected when I got elected back in 2010. So we served first 8 years together. I constantly went to New York and recruited companies and people, and he was always mad at me. But think about this, Florida has 2 to 3 million more people, and Cuomo's budget is almost double. And now she wants us to bail him out. That's wrong.
It's funny that you mentioned New York. Governor Cuomo continues to find himself really on the headlines. He's the vice chair of the National Governors Association, and they're advocating just alongside Nancy Pelosi for additional funds. They came out yesterday requesting $500 billion in state bailout funds. And so clearly, even though they are trying to say this is not a red state, blue state issue, it clearly is when you look at where the money is going, what it's backfilling, and the partisan war that's really raging at the expense of taxpayers.
Right. We have to pay for it. And why would people that got fed up with Cuomo and moved to Florida, now why would we have to pay for his excesses? But by the way, let me give you the National Governors Association. I didn't join when I was governor because it was always for more federal whatever. More federal regulations, more federal, support, all these things. And so I didn't join it. And plus they wanted $300,000 a year from us in Florida. And so I never joined it. So it's just a group that just wants more federal money. And look at what they want us to fund. Look at these pensions all around the country. Illinois by itself has $137 billion shortfall in their pension. They like taxpayers in other states to pay for that because they don't want to have to pay for it, and they don't want to use Rahm Emanuel's "Don't let a crisis go to waste" stuff. So let's go. There's a crisis. Let's go grab some money. California, they provide health care for illegal immigrants. All right, I mean, that's not what we ought to be doing. I mean, we
Right.
got, let's deal with the crisis we're under, not to go fund a bunch of liberal ideas.
Well, Senator, I think many people in the state of Florida and, of course, around the country agree with your sentiments here. I want to take our next question from one of our sentinels, one of our activists in Florida, Jerry from Florida. He asked,
recently, thousands of people went to New York to help fight the virus. One gentleman, Paul Carey, lost his life. He was a paramedic. The governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, said he has to tax the wages of all out-of-state people that came and risked their lives to help New Yorkers. What do you think about that?
How ridiculous. So yeah, I know people that went to try to help New York
mm,
because they had such a crisis there with regard to this coronavirus. And so now he wants to, any money they made while they were working there, he wants to tax them. I mean, what a slap in the face.
mm-hmm.
And so, but that's exactly what they do. If you go and do any business in New York, they tax you for that day you're there.
Wow.
They're after every dime they can get. And by the way, they don't balance their budget. They just keep borrowing more money every year. So when I was governor, I balanced the budget and I paid off a third of the state debt. It's the first time Florida had reduced its debt in 20 years.
Mm.
But that's what you should be doing. You should say, families have to live within their means. Government should live within their means. And by the way, think about what they're saying. They're saying they don't want to tax their citizens more. They want to tax other citizens more because that's what people want to do. No one ever says, "Oh, raise my taxes." I don't care if you raise somebody else's taxes. That's exactly what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, I think what we're finding out is there's definitely a right way and a wrong way for states and the federal government to be responding to the economic impact of the coronavirus. So let's shift gears a little bit here, sir. What actions do you think are the right ones? What actions would you want to see moving forward from Congress as it relates to our economic recovery? And what sort of priorities would fall into that mix?
Sure. I put out a plan. You can go on the website, rickscott.senate.gov, and see it. It always comes down to you. How do you feel comfortable? Because it doesn't matter what a governor says or what the president says, what the CD says. Do you feel comfortable getting out of your house, going to a restaurant, getting on an airplane, going back to work? And what is your employer doing? How is your employer making you feel comfortable? And how is that employer making their customers feel comfortable? So the government at every level has a responsibility on testing, on vaccine, things like that. But ultimately, it's going to come down to our businesses, and they've got to get open. We've got to get this economy going again. And by the way, if you want to help other Americans, buy American products. Don't ever buy anything from communist China. Buy American, buy American, buy American.
That's right. Well, we've been running this petition, sir, to reopen American society, and we actually just hit 100,000 signatories across the country, and it's awesome, and it just shows that people, they recognize the role that they have in this as people that are personally responsible for their health and well-being, and then they recognize the role that they have to actually make the decision to leave their home, to go back to work, and that we need to fight back against this one-size-fits-all, overlap that's happened across the country in the virus. South Florida is very different than Orlando, which is very different than Texas and rural Iowa, and we need to have different responses that are based on the data and the economic and health impact in each of these areas. So I agree, there's a lot that Congress can do in this space, and certainly a lot that we as Americans are responsible for in what these next steps are in reopening. So one of the things, sir, that's been really at the front burner of this issue is all of the stimulus spending. And some have tried to spend their way into economic recovery. You've been on the front lines, sounding the alarm against the federal deficit, raising the flag that this is the next crisis. This is a crisis that's here right now. That's a very challenging issue to advocate for when people just want to spend things to get us out of a crisis. That's really what Congress is best known for. So Walk us through how you convinced your colleagues to rein in Washington's out of control spending, where you see the federal deficit going, and how we should be thinking about that as conservatives.
Well, first off, we do want to help the families that are hurting. I grew up in public housing. I never met my dad. My mom really struggled to put food on the table. I want to make sure those families have the safety nets they need. I think we all do. And so we've got to help with unemployment. We've got to help, all the things, all the safety nets. And we've got to help our small businesses. I think that makes all the sense in the world. But we also have to understand that if we spend money that, think for things like the Kennedy Center and National Endowment for the Art, somebody's going to pay for that. And we're spending people's money that will never see the Kennedy Center. So they're never going to see it. So a family like mine growing up, they're never going to see the Kennedy Center. They're never going to get any value of the National Endowment for the Arts. And so why are we spending money like that in a crisis? This was not part of the coronavirus crisis. Let's do this responsibly. I recently did a op-ed in it was on the Fox Business website, and here's what I'm concerned about. We're going to go down one of two paths. We could go down the path of hyperinflation. That's the most logical one, based on three or $4 trillion budget deficits, highest in history, owing $25 trillion. What happens when interest rates start going up again? We'll never be able to afford our federal government. The Federal Reserve growing their balance sheet. If you look at history, that would say you're going to end up with one of two things: either significant inflation. By the way, who gets hurt? The poor, because their wages don't go up as fast as inflation. Those on fixed income, because they're living on a fixed income, and as there's inflation on groceries and things like that, then they have a harder time to live. Or we go down the path of what happened in the 1930s of deflation. Again, what happens with the poor is there's no jobs. There's no opportunity. For me, like me as a kid, my mom kept telling me, thank God you live in this country. In this country, you can be anything. Well, during the Depression, that was not exactly true. And so we have to look at the consequences of this. And when people say, oh, they're worried about the poor, well, then they wouldn't be wasting dollars, because somebody has to write that check. There's not enough tax revenue you can get out of the rich to pay for this thing. We all pay for government.
Well, thank you for that. I think that these are all issues that we as conservatives need to continue to lead on. We need to continue the drumbeat, both against state bailouts, for reining in out of control spending, but then also providing the resources that are needed for our economic recovery. And to do that, well, we have to let Americans get back to work. So I'll let you have the final word, sir. Your state of Florida, it's on the front. You guys are on the front lines opening up. What's Florida been like, and any lessons that we can share from the Sunshine State to some of our neighboring states?
Well, I can tell you from talking to people all across Florida, they want to get back to work. And they're not sitting there saying, "Oh, I want the federal government to run my life." They don't. They look, if it's a challenge right now, they understand helping the people that are going through the challenge, but they want to get back to a normal life as quickly as possible. They're anxious for their kids to get back outside and get doing things. So it's going to be exciting to watch. There's going to be a lot of really smart entrepreneurs that are going to figure this out. And so I'm excited to watch all the new innovation that's going to happen, that's going to rebuild our great economy.
That's right. Awesome. Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate your time. Thank you for your conservative leadership on and off Capitol Hill. And to everyone that tuned in, thank you for joining Heritage Action, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica.